And we talk about so many different things on this show and encourage communication across all of these different political lines and racial lines and try to, have better conversations. But at some point you're gonna run into someone's identity protected belief where no amount of evidence or information is gonna convince them.
In a world that often pulls us apart, More in Common brings us back to what matters. Hosted by Garen Taylor and Keith Richardson, this isn't your average podcast. It's a challenge to think deeper, question louder, and grow further. At More in Common, we work with NFL teams, tech companies, and professionals across industries to improve communication and foster compassion. And with a focus on emotional intelligence, we aim to bring a wealth of experience to help you navigate the complexities of human connection. We've never been more connected and yet more isolated. We want to explore the roots of that tension and offer a way back to what we all need: real human connection. Enjoy the show.
You are not the king of energy.
I am like Red Bull incarnate. People can't even handle me.
You showed up on this call like
How
a dead fish. Like a dead fish.
flopping around? Was I flopping around on the deck for you? I disagree.
I
I wholeheartedly disagree.
I said a dead fish, not a fish out of water.
Fair. All right. So it was there was no more flopping. It was already just like
Flopping. What
I
are we
think I can't
talking
withstand these
about?
accusations. I mean, the reality is I did show some people around what is lovely Tijuana, and there may be a little recovery. But I
Yeah,
do
fair
tours.
enough.
I show people around. I show them a good time. I show them things they've never seen. A little history, a little culture, a little nightlife.
What an awesome service you
Hit me up
provide.
now. Guaranteed tours.
Hey, if you're in TJ, don't
That's right.
hesitate.
No, don't just not if you're just here. Just come for it. Make a
And
plan.
if you like, subscribe, or leave a comment, we'll send you the information. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to use that as
We
ways to
not?
market guarantee. Maybe if you're
What are you
interested,
talking about? This
just
it's
leave a
called
comment. Hey, I want to know more about guaranteed tours.
it's called crossover marketing. You see what I'm
Crossover
saying? For
marketing.
the
That's
people
what
that
it's all
enjoyed
about.
my karaoke singing, they know that we get down. We have a good time.
What is one thing before we dig into this that you think is common knowledge that you often find isn't?
Wow. And is there in general in the world or specifically to the Tijuana context or where's this question? Where's this
I mean,
question?
common knowledge, it's like the sentiment common sense. Like common sense isn't common sense. It's learned over time.
Yeah, no. There's just so many. There's so many things. Uh, I
Yeah, I was
don't.
surprised the other
All right.
day. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about the impacts of marketing. And I can't remember the context of what we were discussing, but then I mentioned, yeah, like the diamond ring. And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Oh, the diamond ring is entirely derived as an engagement process by the diamond industry in the mid 20th century that had nothing to do with long-term history.
Yeah, they made
Rings
it
were
up.
a thing, but they made it up, and now it's tradition." And he was like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, doesn't everybody know that?"
I,
And maybe
you know,
everybody does, and he just doesn't. But I find occasionally that people don't
but how did he
actually know that
receive this
fact.
information? Was he ready to trust you on it? Or was he like, I don't think so, Keith.
No, he totally took it,
Okay.
accepted it as a
It
as
wasn't. It
our
wasn't one
friendship
of the
is
things
a
that was like
trusted one.
load bearing for
No,
who he thought he was
no,
as a person. Because some of that
no.
stuff can be crushing.
Can be. It can be.
This is the More in Common podcast. I'm Garen Taylor. That's Keith Richardson. This week, we're going to
We're
talk
3
about.
minutes in, and we haven't talked about anything.
Oh, I don't even do intros anymore, though. We just roll into the episode now.
I know,
This is
I know.
this is a fun treat for the people who listened back in the day when we used to do official intros. Remember the
Yeah.
wrestling intro?
Yes, I do. Yeah,
But that's I had to let that go. We had to move on from that because we evolved as
yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah, it's grown. What are we
It's
talking
grown.
about today?
Well,
What's on your mind?
this week, we're talking more kind of in the throughput of the last 2 episodes where we've been talking about the cost of being right, and there was something that kinda stuck out to me in that conversation about why we make these choices and how they even occur. Uh, and it also struck me too. I was, endlessly scrolling the internet as I want to do,
Hey, don't
and
judge it.
saw this clip about a guy who was, well, the Pope is wrong, like in this whole political thing. Like he was ready to give up on the Pope. It's just like, wow, that really isn't a cognitive thought. You're not breaking this down logically. That is straight an emotional thing. And so it got me into thinking about how even things that you were saying, like common knowledge, like the Pope knows about Catholicism. Pretty sure
Does
he's read
he?
the Bible
I thought he was
once or
supposed to stay
twice.
out of talking being careful about what he talks about with
Yeah, yeah.
Catholicism. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not, and when these people challenge or can't accept new information, it's not about stubbornness or stupidity. It is this unconscious bias that they dismiss this information if it not only goes against what they think, but what they think their group thinks. And there was research apparently that I found later on in my nerdy ways of internet holing. Don Kahan's foundational research about identity protective cognition. So that's what we're going to talk about. Identity protective cognition, how it works, what it means, what we do for it.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about his theory in particular, and it's not universally accepted. I mean, I think this is one of the areas that when we think about why you're here listening to this podcast, is it's really easy to anchor on one thing and say that's the thing. Identity is such a complicated mix of experience. But I think one of the things for Kahan is the paradox that he researches is that more information in education doesn't necessarily change someone's perspective. In fact, more often than not, it just makes people more educated and better at defending their identity, not looking for the facts that support a different conclusion. I think that's one of the more interesting elements. But to your point, like, it's not necessarily people being dumb, stubborn, or ignorant. Often those who are strongest in their held beliefs are more educated about their beliefs. Um, and that, go ahead.
Well, I also thought it was interesting too that because we talk a lot on the show about biases. We've done a few episodes about confirmation biases and the different things that lead people into this kind of reasoning. And there's some obvious things, but I really thought it was interesting and didn't put as much weight on to as I did until after reading this, kind of how much the social identity impacts your own sense of identity. And so that this kind of cognition is happening, as we always say on the show, in a way of safety. If I disagree with everybody around me, like I'm gonna get kicked out of this bar. You know what I mean? I imagine it like being in the motorcycle bar, and then like you say the wrong thing, and then all of a sudden everybody turns around and looks at you like, oh, now I gotta run. So there's part of that happening unconsciously in your brain too in that moment where you're like, well, no, I can't obviously go against what everybody else is saying because then I'm gonna get kicked out of my group.
Yeah. I mean, and look, we'll stay focused on identity for a second, right? Like, identity is such a nebulous and unstructured thing, right? Effort for today's episode. I'm going to stop ending every sentence with right. I listen back and I'm like, right, right, right. Drives me nuts.
You drive
So I'm
yourself
gonna,
crazy sometimes? Is that what
I do. I drive myself crazy. Identity is rooted in so many different life experiences.
Yes, absolutely.
And often we don't identify ourselves as who we are. The nature of true, I mean, this is where Buddhism really anchors, meditation, uh, research from Dr. Mike Gervais, this idea of who am I? And so often we attach these external labels to that answer.
It is kind of like you're saying, a connective thing, right? So it's like your identity connects you to an emotion when something happens, which connects you to the conclusion to it. And like I said, this is all subconsciously happening, according to the studies that are connected to this. And there really are these 4 points about identity that because not all of your beliefs in that sense are load bearing. Not all like
Yes.
we can disagree about a movie, right? I love
Right.
Big Trouble in Little China. Excellent film.
Okay. I've never seen
5
it.
stars. You've never seen Big Trouble in Little.
No. I love that response every time. Every time. You haven't seen this movie. What? Yeah.
I'm saddened for you. I'm not even mad at you. I'm just
Me not seeing it attacks your identity.
no, it doesn't at all, but we could also disagree about its greatness if you didn't find it as great as I do, but now you have
Fair
to
enough.
watch it. I wanna
Now I have to
report.
watch it.
I wanna report
Okay.
back. Yeah.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is the
Sounds
yeah.
good.
But there's 4 4 primary things that make your identity that make your belief, like, identity load bearing, that kick in the IPC, that kick in the identity protective cognition, that they're shared by your primary social group, that they connect to your sense of moral worth, right? They tell you something about how you are as a person, that they occurred or they've been in part of your worldview since your formative years, right? This things that you learn, especially in your adolescence, uh, really become to feel like things that are true world facts as opposed to just your opinion or just your way of seeing things, right?
That
And
ties back to our conversation with Kelly about generational impact in the
absolutely.
circumstances that you identify as a millennial or you identify as Gen X or you identify as boomer, whatever it might be.
And it
That's all
crosses over to
built
that
on
social
your
group as well, right? So
that's right.
that there's overlapping there. And the things that are currently under public pressure or public scrutiny also helps because it feels like you're being attacked, right? It feels like there's pressure being placed now on that belief, which also helps make it. Ooh, I didn't know I can do that. That makes it load bearing. People
We're
who
off
don't
the
watch us
rails
on
today.
YouTube really are missing out
You
on.
really get confused. Yeah. I don't watch us on YouTube. I'm gonna be confused later when I listen.
What are you saying?
Um No, I mean, and it's this idea to your point, right? Is we do have these group identities, and that that element of expectations, right? Like we talk a lot about survival, that component of how we neurologically process threats. When we identify deeply with a group, any challenge to that group becomes a challenge to self. It becomes a threat response. And we protect that, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of the group, because that group, I might have it. I belong to it. I feel a sense of belonging in that space. So if for whatever reason that group doesn't exist, I don't know where I exist. And this isn't some super overt process of cognition. Back to the original point, most of these ideologies and ideas aren't tapped into this cognitive process. The cognitive process is the end result. The initial reaction is this disconnect between expectations and what you know to be true. but that's what you know, big T, little t, right? Like what you know to be true based on the validations that you've been provided in the groups that you
And
belong
that's why
to.
people always say like, "Ooh, don't get emotional." Of course you're being emotional.
Yeah.
You're a human being, you don't get to just turn it off, you know what I
And
mean?
it's not just
Some people can, but it's rare, if you're an actual sociopath, but it's a that's
and it's
rare.
not just negative emotions
Right.
either, right? It's
Exactly.
the
It's
ones
the
that
positive
fire you
emotion, the
up.
feeling
The
of belonging that makes you
That's right.
reiterate and put 10 toes down on
Yeah.
whatever thing it is, you know? And we talk about so many different things on this show and encourage communication across all of these different political lines and racial lines and try to, have better conversations, but at some point you're gonna run into someone's identity protected belief where no amount of evidence or information is gonna convince them when they feel like their concept of self itself is being threatened. There's no getting in through the normal channels, no the normal pathways. And so the only way to really get to that is asking them, asking directly, like what would it mean for you if this belief was wrong? Like what do you lose?
Yeah. Like you bring up something really important to the outcome of this episode is there are two types of curiosity, and we talk about curiosity with Katie. Um, see if I can see if I can find it real quick. Nope, can't find it. It's not where I thought it was. Um, but curiosity, the end of the day, is that underlying element. There's a lot of research on depolarization, and back to the point of Kahan's paradox, depolarization doesn't come from um, just teaching people more stuff. Depolarization comes from exposing yourself and like learning from other people. So you're meeting people that you would put into a category and create this generalization. So you create this exposure to others and you learn from them and you humanize them. And in turn, are they humanize you? Of course, that can create the exception rule, right? Like, oh, yeah, you're one of the good ones, Garen. Um, you know what that microaggression means. But you do have to be careful and you have to understand these things are occurring in order to understand that, like, just information, just telling someone they're wrong, telling someone that they don't know what they're talking about is not a meaningful engagement strategy in order to move forward in a more positive way.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
identity is the big component. Now, I think what's interesting about identity is while we talk about how identity is formed in early, uh, you know, early development phases of the brain, um, understanding where someone formed or when someone formed this identity to externalities is important too, because there are things that will happen over the course of a lifetime that will change how someone might attach their identity to external stimulus. So at some point there may be a an identity attachment to a job, right? This is the job I was building for since I was 16. I got it. I'm 30 and it's not what I expected. And then I go through this grief-like state. Now I'm looking for
right.
a new identity and I'm looking for a new group or a new external space to connect with. Those externals, when someone shifts that attachment later in life, they become more ingrained than they were at early stages. They're actually harder to shift. They become more evangelical. This is born agains tend to be a lot pushier. about religion because they found it. Not
Right.
that not that it was ingrained in them as a child, as they found it. So now they're more attached to it, and it's even more difficult to move someone off of that needle if that's your end goal. We've talked about it shouldn't be your end goal to change someone's mind anyway, but if that's your framing, you're gonna be climbing uphill
Yeah, no,
without
I
any
mean,
tools.
it's important because we do need to create some space for some sort of conversation. We can't keep going on like this. I believe. I think
I
that's
agree.
part of the reason why I do this with you is because of the idea of what we're trying to accomplish with it. And seeing again in a world that we live in right now, where you get so much false information that feeds your identity protected belief and drives you deeper deeper into this hole. I mean, that example I gave earlier of the podcast was the guy with his parents, where they're constantly talking about, politics and Trump and their views and stuff like that, and to see, someone who's identified as a Catholic their entire life give that up in order to, what I mean, identify with this other identity, goes to show you exactly how the not only is your identity shiftable, fungible, movable over time, but that the pressures of your social group and the reality that you face can really undergird, what you identify as, and what becomes an identity protected belief. And that isn't to say that there's no case where people who are clinging on to their identity protected beliefs aren't doing so without some reason. I think there is some flip side to it. I think marginalized groups it's been shown in studies that regularly encounter misleading information about them, uh, revert to this kind of identity protected behavior. Uh,
Yeah.
and then that has reason, forward to it. Someone's denying your right to exist, kind of thing. It becomes a much
Yeah,
different
there's
approach.
like a resistance response to your defining my group. So I'm identifying with that group as a protective mechanism for the group, not even just for myself, right?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
And so it's not symmetrical in that sense, but it is important that those conversations still come back to, because if you bring it back to the main root of what are you protecting? What part of your identity? You know what I mean? What would it mean for you if you were wrong about this part of it? It does allow you to shift in
so
some ways
I
the view of the conversation.
we talk about survival a lot.
Yeah.
Like the survival of the group, the survival of the genes, survival. But survival isn't necessarily a living and dying thing, and it isn't necessarily a reactive thing to fear, right? We inherently seek purpose and meaning. And so these external groups that seek purpose and meaning or give us purpose and meaning, because we can't live in a state of stress and anxiety 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we would die. Like
Yeah.
physiologically, we would have,
Exhausted.
uh, we would just be, I mean, neurologically, we'd be exhausted. Physiologically, we'd have negative outcomes because we'd have higher blood pressure, we'd have, deteriorated immune systems. Like all of these things are true to living in that space. So we also need positive outcomes. So when someone comes along and is challenging you against your external identity beliefs, they're taking you away from the positive spaces that you use and leverage to manage the stresses and anxieties of everyday life, right? We attach to these things because they give us meaning and purpose. And people wonder, there's that, I think you're referring to that podcast where the two kids talk to their parents, right? And the parents have even gone so far as to say, like, hey, the kids could die. Um, and as long as their belief system is proven true, like, I forget exactly what it is, but, like, they don't what that tells me is they don't identify as parents. They identify in this other area first, and their children are challenges to their own identity, which has to be a wildly hard
Yeah,
experience to have emotionally. Like, I couldn't imagine
especially at
navigating
Thanksgiving.
that,
Yeah.
especially on Thanksgiving. But, like, people don't attach their identities to their families, and people who do can't see how that can't happen. And the reality in this is familial bonds aren't guarantees for identity attachment, right? And so it's understanding that we are all coming at it from the same neurology, yes. But the things that have informed the emotional responses that attach to our identities are different based on circumstance
And
and
so in that
lived
conversation,
experience.
like, what do we do? I think, like, when you're at that wall, one of the things that I was thinking about is the explicit way that we've been talking about separating the issue from the identity, right? Like, I'm not asking you to give up who you are, but I'm asking if there's a version of you that could think about this differently or could hold this belief differently, and seeing if that can give someone the space to separate the issue from the way they see themselves.
I would go even a step further back and engage. This is where I think curiosity becomes so critical because it's recognizing first that your identity is influencing how you're showing up towards somebody else's social identity, right? And that conflict is what's creating your own resistance, which inherently creates resistance in the other person. So if you seek to understand clearly where they're coming from and accept, hey, I judge it, but I'm receiving it because I can't help but judge it. Like it's just part of the natural element. But you need to inspect your interoceptive response. Like where are you feeling this physiologically? What is your body reacting to? There's a disconnect between your own expectations and what the other person is telling you because their whole entire experience in life is just different from yours. So, how can you accept that it exists? And this is the challenge, right? This goes into something you said. Why do we even do this? We need to hold space because something has to give, something has to change. And I think about AA in this regard. AA is universally proven to not be successful on the whole. Um, I think it's somewhere around 30% of people who go through AA stay sober, but we still do it. Why? Because there's value in it. It might not be the only way to solve for substance abuse, but it is a way, and it's a way that has worked for people, and it's okay to try it. Like, give the effort. And, but you have to sincerely give the effort. You can't just try. It can't be this, eh. But also recognize that the Kahan's paradox, just because you're giving information, more information tends to lead to more justification of one's identity and belief
Right,
system.
right.
And then if it's yourself and you're resisting because of your own group identity, maybe there's an opportunity to ask yourself, who are you? Like my identity, we talked about this before, is not a father. It is not a man. It is not um, a husband. It is not an executive. It is not a podcast host. It is not uh, any of those things. My identity is someone who works to be compassionate as often as possible, who works to be honest as often as possible, who seeks to give effort, and at the end of the day, that is someone who is grateful for what is in my life. That's my identity. So if you can find who you are, and even in saying all of that stuff, right? There's stuff to navigate. It's more transferable and it's more durable. And so group identity attachments don't have as much hold over you when that group goes off the rails and loses their minds, and it doesn't, what are we doing here? I don't belong here anymore, right?
No, I mean, tightly held values, loosely held beliefs. I think that's kind of how I see it in a lot of ways, and that's what allows me to feel like if the group is shifting away from those values, then you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Then
Then I can shift away from the group,
right. I no longer believe
right?
that group is moving toward
Right.
those values, right?
Because
Um, it's
because you have
it's kind of how we frame that, or at least how I frame it for myself, I should say.
I think it's awesome.
Well, this is another one of those heavily packed episodes with a lot of reflection, a lot of thought.
Yeah.
We talk about so many deep topics that 30 minutes goes by so fast, but that doesn't mean you can't do this alone or with your friends. Spark up a comment, share this episode with somebody who is battling with their own identity, and leave us a comment on YouTube or your favorite podcast application. In the meantime, this is the More Uncommon Podcast. I'm GERREN Taylor. That's Keith Richardson, and we'll see you next week.
Next week.